Now, most of our information about history is coming from white people or other people. And they have nothing good to say about black people's history and African history. Nothing good to say. But what amazes me is that black people are believing their crap. Especially about slavery. Like, slavery did have its problems. But can you imagine how weak black people are if the atrocities, like they say, I'm sure that happened to some black people, yes. And those black people actually rebelled. They did something about it. Some didn't, but most black people were not treated that way, is exactly what the Southerners say. And notice that the Southerners will tell you something different about slavery, but it's ignored. The Africans will tell you something different about their history and culture, but it gets ignored. You see the pattern? There's a reason why we called white people crackers or bigoted racist people crackers, because crackers, because they would say the most outrageous and ridiculous things about us and to us. So why is it that we're believing their nonsense about slavery? It did have its problems, but they're exaggerating about it. That's what gets on my nerves, and people are just believing it. Our ancestors were that weak that they were not being paid for years on end, decades, centuries on end. Their families are constantly being taken away from them. They're constantly being beat for whatever reason. Their women and even the men are raped constantly. I mean, like, that's a Twilight Zone episode or a Black Mirror episode. Come on, man. And who's telling us this? Where does this information mainly come from? Well, it's coming from white people, isn't it? Do they look on us favorably throughout the centuries when it comes to our history and when it comes to our culture? No, they don't. So why are we believing what they say? Most likely there's a lie there somewhere. There's some truth. Because yes, slavery did have its problems because there were some nasty people, but the slaves were property. Property is valuable. Like, let's say that Black Wall Street was a slave plantation, and a whole bunch of Caucasians came in and destroyed the plantation and killed a whole bunch of slaves. There's no way they're getting away with that. But in the free system, which that's when Black Wall Street was destroyed, they got away with it. It was so easy for them to get away with it. All the lynchings, you'd think a slave could go to the market and all of a sudden get lynched and everything's going to be okay. Yeah, the slave owner's going to say, yeah, it's okay, whatever. I'll just purchase another slave. That's all. Go about your business. No, they're going to do something about it. They'll make sure that that doesn't happen again. And the slave would be safe to go to the market. Black people will be safe in general and won't be attacked because you're dealing with property and property is valuable. Do you understand? But no. They have people indoctrinated thinking that slavery was the worst thing ever and we were in bondage. Do you know when you go to work, you're basically in bondage? You can't do whatever you want. If you do whatever you want, you're going to get in trouble. They're going to come after you. There's people above you that you have to obey. So you are in bondage, and in a sense, you are a slave. Then you leave the plantation, then you could do pretty much, even then, you can't do whatever you want. There's rules. But definitely, wherever you go to work, you're in bondage. You have to do what they say. So when the slaves are on the plantation, yes, they have to do what the owner says. When you go to work, you have to do what your bosses say, or else you're going to get in trouble. It's the same concept. It's the same concept. And I guarantee you that if racist, bigoted people were under slavery, they won't be racist, bigoted people once they get out of slavery. People don't seem to realize there were so many mulattoes in the South. Well, that means that Caucasians and Negroes were getting along with one another. Now, some people are going to say that, no, that's because of raping. Like, really? You think grown-ass black men would tolerate that? They would go ballistic if that was a constant thing. They would go ballistic. No, it's because they fancied each other. And also, how is it that a racist society is going to be mixing up with black people? Black women. Or black men with white women. Like, why would a racist society allow that? Because there was a lot of mulattoes in the South. Well, it's because they were far more favorable to black people in the South than they were the North. The North was a racist, bigoted society. They did not like black people. These are the same people that wanted the Western Territory to be all white and all free. But yet somehow people forget about that. They did not like black people. They came down, they saw what was happening, and then all of a sudden they started attacking black people because thousands upon thousands of black people got into positions of power after the Civil War. And most likely they were in positions of power before, because we have a vague notion about what really was going on before the Civil War, like if black people were in power or not. You know, white people are not going to tell certain information if it favors black people. They're just not going to do it, right? So thousands upon thousands of black people got into positions of power in the South, not the North. Wasn't the North supposed to be progressive and less racist? Well, no, it's racist, the North. They're not going to allow that. Are you crazy? So the Northerners came down, they saw it, and then what did they do? They did everything they could to get rid of black people out of power. And then what happened? Jim Crow. Well, how come Jim Crow wasn't around before? How come de facto segregation wasn't around before? There were free black people in the South during the time of slavery. They were mingling with each other. So many mulattoes. Even in the black codes, they'll tell you free Negroes, freedmen, and mulattoes. They had to mention mulattoes because there was a significant amount for them to mention it. A race as big as society is not going to have a whole bunch of mulattoes running around the place. They despise that. And the Northerners despise the South because of that. But yet, the South is more racist than the North. That's bizarre. My whole point in saying is that why are we believing what white people say about our history? Most likely, they're lying. Right? They're lying. Let me talk about your history and your culture. I don't like you. I despise everything about you. Like, any outsider could see that. But I'm going to tell you and everybody else about your history and your culture. And repeat it over and over and over again. And then now you're going to ask yourself, well, why is everybody believing what I'm saying? Clearly, it's so obvious that this guy doesn't like me. So why is everybody believing, well, because I have the microphone, I'm on stage, and I'm running things, so people trust me. That's why. But clearly, if you obviously pay attention, I clearly don't like you, so obviously I'm not going to say anything good about you. And that's what they've been doing for centuries. But yet, somehow, black people just fall into the trap that, yeah, slavery, they were dead. When we got out of slavery, that's when they started attacking us. That's when they started attacking us and marginalizing us and doing everything they can to undermine us. All the prisons started to ramp up. And it's like, well, black people were on the plantation. They were actually doing something proper. They were civilized. They were also, contributing a lot to society. Very few black people were in prison, unless you consider working prison. And it's funny when they say that, oh, they're forced to work. Well, have pretty much every average U.S. citizen stop working for a month. Oh, what? They're forced to work in order to survive? In order to survive, they're forced to work, right? Yeah, we have to work in order to survive. So when they say, oh, these black people were forced to work, it's like, really? And what makes you think that black people did not want to come here by themselves? Or black people or Africans did not know how to build ships and come to the New World by themselves? No. We had to wait for other people to come and get us. And that's another thing that black people fall into that trap. Are you serious? So only light-skinned people basically are smart back then. They were smart back then. Africans were so stupid that they couldn't even build ships to travel. All their history, all the different diversities in Africa, none of them knew how to build ships and travel to other places by themselves. It's ridiculous. Who's telling us this? Oh, it's white people or other people who have an attitude towards us. And also, where does this attitude come from? They don't tell us. They don't tell us at all. I mean, like, get a clue, man. They're not telling the truth about history, especially slavery. Slavery did have its problems. I'm not saying it didn't have its problems. It did. but they're exaggerating about it. The abolitionists were propagandists. Anybody, and even if you study the abolitionists, you could see that, yeah, these people are kind of sketchy. And even Northerners couldn't stand these abolitionists. And the Northerners did not like slavery. So stop playing the victim and find out what really happened in history, because they're lying about a lot of stuff.